Tēnā koutou, kua tau mai te aroha, nā manaakitanga o te atua. E whare e te nui tēnā koe. E papa ka toko nei tēnā koe. Ka rakawha, ka puta e tangata e tēnei rohi. Ka mihi ki au ori. Nā kia tai ki o te tēnei rohi. Kia ora, my name is Tom Matthews, and welcome to St Andrew's College. Karakia just to begin. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga o te mea ngaro. Ki runga, ki tēnei o tātou. Ka mahia te huia mā kini. Kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori. Kia tuturu, ka whakamua, kia tina huie taikia. Let the strength and the life force of our ancestors be with each of us, freeing our path from obstacles, so that our words, our spiritual power, our love, our language are all upheld, permanently fixed, established, and understood, moving forward together. Kia ora, my name is Tom. I've been working in Christchurch for over 20 years with our youth and across many different schools, and I've landed at St Andrews, and as from St Andrews, welcome to our chapel. I've learnt to respect and fear more than anything else the reason why we're gathered. I've come across lots of different issues with our youth, and I've seen changes over 20 years, dramatic changes. I've gone from a department of 1 to a department of 9, and we're still not keeping up with the mental health issues that our children face. But welcome, and I welcome you in that spirit of love and complexity. I just want to tell you a story before I hand over. I'm working with a student recently, and she has allowed me to share her story after months. She's painted a picture for me that's given me a little more clarity. And she said, there's me, and then there's my eating disorder. And she painted a picture of her eating disorder, and she named it a name that I can't name, and there's hallowed roof here. And she's developed this over time. She said it's come for about 5 years. It's lived with me, and she said, and I like it. When my mum asks me if I've eaten that food, it says yes to her face, even though I haven't. When the doctor asks me if I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning exercise, and it says no, I'm not, when I have. And without any guilt, without any remorse, this part of me can lie without any hint of a conscience. And what happens, and she says, and then my dad will yell at me, and what happens then, the tentacles that attach me to him just get stronger. And when the doctor says, you need to do this, the tentacles between me and him just get stronger. And I'm like, why? So this is like a parasite. She said no, because she's very clever. She said, no, it's like a symbiote. It's something that we have a shared relationship. He gives to me, and I give to him. I said, how so? And this is months of work. And she said, there's a small part of me that when I was 7 years old, I wanted to protect. I felt different. I felt ugly. I felt alone. And in that space, I felt hurt. So I took part of myself and I protected it. And what does this look like? It's like I'm in a glass dome, protected in a high tower, and I'm protected completely. And the job of my eating disorder is to keep me safe. And how does it do that? It takes all the heat. And when people attack my eating disorder, they're trying to attack me. My eating disorder is to protect a core part of me. And the more people get frustrated, the stronger it gets. And the eating disorder one keeps me alive and takes things from me. And I know this, and she's at a point where she knows that the complexity of this relationship is in perfect balance. And she wants to keep it that way. And the more I push for understanding of this core 7-year-old part of her that wants to be protected, the more I understand that she wants it to stay that way. I sit with that and all the pictures and the creations around that she's helping me understand her and helping her understand how this dynamic works. And it pictures for me the frustration I've had trying to understand and for the dads that say, just eat, damn it. For the doctors who say, just do this, for the social workers, for the parents, for the sports coaches, for the community, for the schools, for the people that love these guys the most. It is such a frustration, such a complex, such a, I think sometimes misunderstood. And as support people, I think it's lonely. And I think we each come with a different iteration of this complex, layered, symbiotic relationship that our people we love have established with this eating disorder. My hope is that as we gather like this, we realise there's a study that had over 22% of our youth from 6 to 18 have disordered eating globally across. So this has risen dramatically since 2017 and before. We're dealing with an issue, and you'll know this, but we're dealing with issues that is more dangerous than our roads. We have higher fatalities from eating disorders than we do from road accidents. And I can be more dramatic with some of the stats. 10% of us who develop eating disorders won't be alive in 10 years' time. This is big, serious, scary, and it needs a collective understanding and love in order to help our people untangle themselves from this relationship they have. Welcome, and thank you for the spirit in which you've come into this room, and I hope that as this progresses and as it starts a wider network of support, Sarah, that this will become a resource to all of us of both understanding and support. Ngā mihi. Now I'll pass the time over to you, Sarah.
And thank you to you, Tom, as well. Just so everyone's aware, Tom Matthews is the lead counsellor of St Andrew's School, who have incredibly kindly donated this space to us to hold this special event today. And he's raised some really important points. And those points are why we're gathering here today. We're gathering here as part of the very first Eating Disorders and Body Image Awareness Week to address some of the gaps that he's mentioned in knowledge and understanding, and to really look at some of the awareness and help to build better understanding across the community, which could potentially act as a prevention. So I'm co-chair and co-founder of Eating Disorders Care Support New Zealand, and I'm here as a person with lived experience of eating disorders, and that lasted into my early 40s. I recognise that many of the difficulties I faced over my life, the more I've learned with my own children as a parent with lived experience, are deeply tied and ingrained with that experience, and how much more quickly and more supported I would have felt towards the journey to recovery. So we are currently supporting at Eating Disorders Carer Support New Zealand over 600 parents, carers, families, whānau, all who are reaching out for support, and all who could have had quite different journeys if we had better awareness at the front of our public services and health system. So that's where we came to this. We have taken part recently in the Eating Disorders Strategy, which has just been announced yesterday by our Mental Health Minister, Matt Ducey, which we see as a thrilling springboard to start making a difference. Now, we understand that this is not going to be meeting everyone's immediate expectations, but what it's meant to be is a springboard and a starting point, and the beginnings of having greater awareness across our communities in how we can approach people when we don't know how to talk to people, and in what makes a difference for carers and for parents and for people with eating disorders, and what works and what doesn't work, and hope and ways forward. And in many of the exciting things that are happening, there's so much happening at the moment. There are so many approaches that are changing, which are a much more holistic and person-focused way forward in support. So we are here today sharing the voices of parents with lived experience and with people who have lived experience, including those that have moved forward into a deep passion into helping others using their own lived experience. And that includes people who offer support as peer support roles, which we're really learning makes a big difference. So that's why we're here today. We launched this very first Eating Disorders and Body Image Awareness Week to start sharing many of these insights that we've seen and many of the experiences that we have found have been helpful. And most of all, to share hope, because we know with the right support that eating disorders are something which we can recover from. They sound complex. The more we learn, the less frightening they are, and the more we're able to offer help and support from a much more understanding role across the community. So this is why we're here today, and I'm really thrilled to share with you some beautiful experiences from people, from parents, carers, artists, people who are working within the sector and across the community. So leading on to that, our first amazing guest, we have had a change of order, as is the way. We would really love to welcome Hamish Campbell. He is our MP for Ireland, and Hamish has a particular interest in this area. He has come into his role with a really wide interest in learning more, and he has been appointed the Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Health Select Committee because of his interests across a whole range of connected areas, so across science and innovation, and also with his background in learning and his own education, and with his own connections of friends and family. So I won't talk any more to that. I will leave you in the capable hands of Hamish, and thank you so much for being here today.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Sarah, to come and speak here today. And I do just want to acknowledge Tom and St Andrews for providing this venue in support for Eating Disorders Carer Support New Zealand, and in hosting this inaugural Eating Disorder and Body Image Awareness Week. And I have to admit, I have used this week as an excuse to reach out to someone quite close to me whose son has been going through this. And I do just want to acknowledge everybody in the room that is experiencing an eating disorder. And I want you to know that you're not alone. and also to the families of those that are going through an eating disorder. We do hear you, we do see you, and I know that it can be a very isolating experience. And I think kind of one of the things that really stood out in the conversation I had this morning was there's a 24 hours a day, 7-day-a-week experience. It's not that you can wake up on a Saturday morning and things are going to be different. So I do just want to acknowledge everybody's experience that they're going through. As Sarah mentioned, we have launched a strategy to increase investment in eating disorder services, but I didn't really want to kind of talk too much about that. I appreciate everybody is probably familiar with that. I think the main hope it brings is hopefully we can have a meaningful change that will ensure the strategy remains fit and for purpose and meets the needs of those that are affected. And I appreciate everybody's journey is going to be different, and the eating disorders and body image actually covers a wide range of issues and journeys. We believe that support for eating disorders is best provided using a full continuum of care across primary health care, early intervention and community services, along with kind of more specialist and inpatient services for people with highest needs. But I'm really here this afternoon to hear the stories, to hear the experiences and the challenges that you face, because you're the ones walking this path. But I do just want to just really leave with you the thought that it is a very important area for New Zealand, and as a member of the Health Select Committee, I'm here really to listen and to hear your stories and to provide whatever support that we can. So thank you very much for the invitation.
And again, thank you so much, Hamish. It was a really last-minute decision to be able to have you attend, and we are thrilled that you've come here. So it's really important that we see this type of support from every person in every walk of life. So it's going to take this type of collaboration and communication, which is going to make a difference. And this type of work is really guided by our experiences as parents. We are very inclusive of every voice, and it's important to have every voice alongside. And talking to that experience, I would love to welcome Gillian Wordsworth. Gillian is a parent, an artist, and she's had considerable impact upon her artistic career as part of her journey. And I will leave her to talk about this. Thank you, Gillian.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Gillian. I am a mum. I'm a trained teacher and worked for many years in the primary sector, and now I'm branching out into the secondary sector part-time. I'm a mum of 4 children, and as of quite recently, 9 grandchildren. I'm a mum of 4 children, and that gave me a lot of pride in my life, and I love them dearly. They are my biggest work of art. But instead of flooding you with photos of my children, just symbolically, one of my very first art exhibitions was of flax in a whānau, and using the analogy of the flax bush. You know, when we harvest the harakeke, we're taught to only harvest the outer leaves, leave the pito growing, leave the mama me te papa, leave them protecting, nourishing, looking after, and make use of the outer leaves. My art practice sort of came into it probably in my early 30s and sort of balanced it alongside teaching part-time and raising a family. And there came a time when I established a studio. Just around the time of the earthquakes, we moved to Christchurch. My children were growing and going off to university. I just had one baby left in the nest, and this was going to be the time for me to really make it as an artist. Worked hard, did lots of paintings, but sometimes life has other plans. And my son came home from uni to visit, and he sat with us over dinner, and he pointed out at the end of the meal that my daughter had eaten nothing. And our dog, our lovely well-trained dog, who always sat on the mat at the other side of the lounge during mealtimes, had started hanging around under the table. And you can put the two together. And the realisation that my daughter was struggling to eat, and the impact that had on us. First, it was the struggle to get recognition, to get a diagnosis, and to access treatment. We are a larger family. A doctor would look at an overweight teenager and think, nah, they don't have an eating disorder, or it won't hurt them to lose a little bit of weight. My daughter was still technically overweight when she was admitted into hospital on a nasogastric feeding on bed rest with a really worrying heart rate. Life was interrupted. That first summer was spent in and out of hospitals. As a mum, we were based out in out at Pines Beach at the time. My life revolved around driving from the beach into Princess Margaret Hospital and back, multiple times a week. And then after she was admitted, trying to go daily to support her and be part of it. That first summer there was, she'd be in hospital for a week or 10 days, and then she'd be home, and then she'd plummet again, and she'd be in hospital again and plummet. The impact on our family was quite huge. As a mum, suddenly all my energy was focused on this sick child. What about these other 3 young adults who are growing and entering the adult world? One of my sons was going through completely different issues at the time, and for a while we decided, well, Dad, you look after the boys and I'll look after the girl. And that worked for a while, but then it didn't, and we had to... the other thing was the cracks in the veneer as a parent. Hey, I had this lovely, beautiful family. I was doing so well. How can one of my children have a mental illness? We'll deal with a bit of judgment. I think in my case it came more from myself than from people around me. Shame, but why hide it? So when Sarah announced the topic for today was unpacking the whys, it's certainly a question we asked ourselves as parents. Why? Why did our child develop this inability to eat, this hatred for herself, this attachment to a disease that was intent on killing her? 20, 30 years ago, there were different psychological philosophies as to why a child developed an eating disorder. I think now we've moved past the social model and we recognise the huge impact that genetics play. And, my husband, we're all from large people, from a large family, but within my husband, he's one of 8 children, the only person in his family who's particularly slim, battled with an eating disorder for probably close to 30 years. Another quote from John Lennon, about happiness. One of the challenges as a parent, parenting a teen, is the rejuggling of your priorities, the reordering of what you see as important. My sons had done reasonably well at school. Our 3rd son graduated as dux of his school, and he's now working really well in engineering. And my daughter had watched him, and she had set that goal, and she's an extremely bright person. She won the Junior Maths Cup 2 years in a row. She was set on, she was going to be dux as well. And suddenly, at age 14, she'd finished school. She always had the thought of getting back, but she was never well enough to re-engage with education. So, these hopes and dreams that you have for your children, you have to put them aside and realise that reality has a different path. And suddenly you realise that actually happiness is way more important. I would rather have my daughter well and happy than have her become, I don't know, a brain surgeon or whatever else she might have set her mind on. We needed to prioritize. There needed to be a certain amount of grieving as parents, but we needed to set our priorities on, a rejigging of our value system. Hamish and I were talking earlier about the isolating effect that eating disorders can have on families, particularly on families as teens. When your focus is on feeding someone 6 times a day, that just becomes everything. What are we going to have for breakfast? Okay, we've got that out of the way. What are we going to have for morning tea? Okay, it's time to psych ourselves up for lunch already. And I'm aware that there are sufferers here in the room who know the other side of that. You're not the mum having to think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? You're having to, if you can find yourself a break from the in between meal times, do it. Is ED caused by trauma? Yes, there was some trauma and some brokenness in our own family. And I do not believe that caused the eating disorder, and I do believe that eating disorder used it as a crack to hide in. Sometimes we can put our energies into addressing the side issues, and so much energy can go into the side issues that the eating disorder gets ignored. And I know there were health professionals who said, well, we need to prioritise dealing with X, Y, Z. And daughter was really happy because X, Y, Z did not include eating. So, yeah. For myself, in that isolation was when I found some online support, and so my main involvement with the Carer Support Network at the moment is within the online support. Anyway, moving on. Daughter started growing, maturing in age. For my own sanity, I needed to find ways of getting my own break. Initially, it started off with finding 10 minutes of mindfulness in a day. I hate that phrase, mindfulness. It's just become so full of all sorts of other stuff. But 10 minutes where I could take time out of whatever we're doing every day and just focus on grounding me, looking after me. I went back to my art practice. I hadn't been able to paint for about 5 years. I'd gone from painting huge, big oil paintings, and I just couldn't. My practice had been to lock myself in the studio, and I could spend 4 or 5 hours putting a layer of sky on, and that was no longer possible. So I returned to a drawing practice, stuff I could do in 10, 15 minutes, maybe stretch it out for an hour. I started painting in mixed media because I could put a layer on, go check that the daughter was still alive, come back and put another layer of paint on. Boats came up as a motive in my art at that stage. At this stage, I was only painting for myself, using it as a way of processing what I was going through. I wondered what the boat was all about, and I realised it became a metaphor for hope. Hope is not for sunny days. Hope is not for when everything is fine. The time that you need hope is when things are really rough, and I did a bit of writing around it, a poem called Hope is a Boat That Carries Me Home. As my daughter started to grow stronger in herself and I could leave her alone for longer periods of time, I knew that I had to start reclaiming my life. And also in reclaiming my life, I was aware I was modelling for her that there was life outside of eating disorder. I went back to painting, and I actually went to university. There in my 50s, with a whole class full of kids, and painting. And I realised I needed to start exploring the darkness, the brokenness. We can't be scared of what the eating disorder is scared of. Okay, if my daughter would say, oh, I'm going to get so fat, we can't be scared of that. My standard answer has become, so what? You say that as if it's a bad thing. There is yuckiness, there has been some trauma in our lives, some dark places. We can't be scared of those dark places. I had to learn to sit comfortably with them. So my art project, I started exploring themes of mental health and mental well-being. I wanted to try and capture that sense of brokenness, but not destroyed, in that place of brokenness when hope can come past and catch our eye. I started drawing people, and then I realised, A, I'm not really the world's best expert at drawing faces, but B, we are more than the bodies we are contained in. I became aware that me, who am I, my thoughts, my feelings, my intellect, my compassions, they're not defined by this body I inhabit. So I wanted to explore painting that was beyond a body. I started reading about the effect, that emotional feeling that comes pre-language, that defies being codified in form or in words. And it led me to exploring abstract art. This particular piece, Interrogating Darkness, Searching for the Light, was about developing that ability to sit in the dark places and not be overwhelmed, and realising that it won't always be so. I started using mineral pigments dissolved in a water-based glue. I looked at a Japanese practice called nihonga. The nihonga artists use pulverised mineral pigments, and they talk about finding beauty out of the brokenness. In this particular piece, I added mica, the sparkly stuff that they put in eyeshadow to make it all glittery. Well, I put that into my paint, and so when you walk along, this painting catches the eye with a little glimmer of light, and you walk past it and have that experience of, what was that? There's this little sparkle. And I likened that to hope. Hope's not the big, bold daffodil on a bright, sunny day. Hope is that little crack of light that comes to you when you're not expecting it. That moment of beauty that gives you that understanding, the belief that things can change. They might not be changed yet, but change is possible. Change is coming. My daughter suffered her eating disorder for 15 years plus. I can't add up the number of nights that she spent in a hospital, myriads of trips to emergency department. Sarah and I attempted to add up the costs one day, and we stopped counting at around $1 million. Please, thank you to taxpayers who funded our health system so that my daughter could find recovery. Thank you to the professionals who persevered and believed. Particular thanks to Victoria, who stepped in when the system was ready to give up, who said, no, we will not let her go. My daughter's now 2-3 years walking towards recovery. She's well weight restored, her thinking is amazing, her personality has returned, her brain has returned. The girl who gave up on education when she was 14 went back to university as an adult student and has an A average. She's doing awesomely well. The girl who stopped menstruating when she was 15 has just given birth to the most beautiful little baby girl. She's an awesome mother. She's determined to live. She's determined to have a great life. I'll finish with this painting that I worked on a few years ago. It was inspired by a walk under the blossoms on the top of Riccarton Park, the cherry blossoms, that avenue, and the blossoms falling and fluttering in the breeze. It reminded me of, I call on my Christian heritage, an Old Testament prophet whose wife had left him, and the Lord told him, go and woo your wife back. And the poem speaks of drawing aside, whispering tenderly in her ear, and she will sing again as she did in the days of her youth. And it goes on to talk about restoration and hope and fulfillment and abundance. When it comes to unpacking the whys, why do we work for recovery? Because it is so damned worth it. Because we are worth having a full life. Because there is hope. There is promise. In our family we say, as long as there is breath, there is hope. Never give up. Never give up. Keep striving. And I wish on you all a full, happy and abundant life. Amen.
Oops. Thank you, Gillian. It's an incredibly difficult journey for everyone. So whether we are parents or carers or supports or people experiencing difficulties, we are all learning all of the time in how to meet each other where we're at. But these experiences, they can be supported by more community support. And that's where we're coming to here, how we can better coordinate support for carers, how we can provide education, how we can provide a better environment where people can start to work together, and how we can provide where people can come to support walking forwards. And the more knowledge we have, the more understanding we have, the less frightening these places are. Currently we have the amazing Juliet Moore. She's a person with living experience, and we're so proud to have her parents here who have been a really huge part of us being here today, because they have walked alongside Juliet throughout her whole journey. They have gone to the most extraordinary lengths in support. And again, meeting her where she's at. That's the important thing that we all have to start to learn. And again, education is a key part of that. When we have greater understanding of what's happening, when we can start unpacking the whys, then we can start to, instead of being frightened and withdrawing and becoming isolated, we can start to move together and start sharing other experiences outside of the eating disorder. Because one of the critical things that I know in my experience with my daughter, hearing that just constantly concentrating upon the eating disorder is something that she found really difficult. And it's something that hindered our relationship. And when we could find other ways to start interacting, that removed some of the emphasis and some of the needs. We still recognise the needs that were there. But by being able to move away and to join into other things that we enjoyed doing together, and that was across art, that was a huge part of our journey, a passion for horses, the outdoors, all of those areas, those were really critical parts where you can join and come together. Now, I have just got the thumbs up from the team that we have Juliet online, so I'm going to turn around. Hi, Juliet. Just would love to welcome you here today. Thank you so much for being here. And sorry for the delay. That's how it is.
Oh, that's fine. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Very much. Now I'm going to leave you to talk, because I am so thrilled to be hearing your journey and your experiences. They're incredibly important. So I will hand over to you, Juliet.
Hi everybody. What caused my anorexia? I now know that it was not one thing, but multiple things. I felt wrong as young as 2 years old. I was bullied relentlessly at primary school about my body, which included multiple sexual assaults, with no support offered there. Today, though, I believe that my sensory issues are the main trigger for my anorexia. This realisation has made a huge difference, actually, in my life. When I was diagnosed at 11, this healthcare system could not meet my needs. If early intervention had been provided, it could have changed the whole trajectory of my life. What has helped? After 15 years of suffering, I was exhausted. I'd exhausted every avenue of potential treatment here in New Zealand. I was very fortunate to be sent by my parents to the United States for residential treatment at the original Montenegro Treatment Centre, founded by a recovered therapist, world expert in eating disorders, and author Carolyn Costin. Surrounded by recovered staff members who understood and provided unlimited support and inspiration, I was given boundaries, creating a sense of safety. Carolyn introduced us to the concept of the canaries in the coal mine, the ones so sensitive that they pick up on the toxicity in our environment. This concept was validating and gave me a sense of purpose beyond my eating disorder. Montenegro taught me that I had superpowers and I could turn the poison of my eating disorder into medicine. Unlike the doctors and clinicians here in New Zealand that treated me as a lost cause and had given up on me completely. Montenegro helped me to reconnect to my soul self, my healthy self, and they nurtured that in many different ways to become stronger than my eating disorder self. I was at Montenegro 3 times and also in another treatment centre in the US. Treatment in the US is really expensive, so I could never stay long enough, but I am confident that if I had been able to, or my parents had been able to afford it, I would be fully recovered today. Yoga has been a lifeline for me, but the only other thing in New Zealand that has helped is my eating disorder coach, trained by Carolyn Costin. My coach, Nicola Coleman, replaced a team of 4 non-eating disorder clinicians I had through ACC. Nicola is there whenever I need her, helping me get through the challenges of living with an eating disorder every minute of every day. Carolyn Costin developed the CCI coaching program, which was the first rigorous training institute providing proper training, supervision and certification for eating disorder recovery coaches. This program is the most intensive coaching program, and even AI recognises CCI as the gold standard of eating disorder coaching. Coaches help fill the gap between treatment and home, helping those suffering from eating disorders and recovering from them in so many different ways. I honestly have no idea what I would do without Nicola. To be clear, in light of Matt Ducey's announcement this week, peer support workers are not coaches. Te Whata Ora's job description for a peer support worker says that lived experience of an eating disorder is not expected, and no qualifications are listed as essential, which could be both harmful for the peers and also for the clients. I personally can't see how this will create any significant change, and I also feel really concerned for both the peers and the clients. My biggest help, however, is my why. My son is my why. I could not love him more, and he's a literal miracle. Literally a miracle. What is not helpful? People commenting on my appearance, be it negatively or positively, comments are taken by my eating disorder and turned into a trigger, sending me spiraling downwards. Please do not comment on anyone's appearance ever. Focus on what you love about them, what they bring to the world. I would suggest phrases such as, I love your energy, or I feel really safe around you instead. This applies to health professionals too. Walking into their offices can be like walking into minefields. Comments like, you look better than last time I saw you, or even your vitals are stable, can be triggering and so often translated into, I am not sick enough to deserve care by the eating disorder, which sometimes leads to trying to be sick enough by the next appointment. The thing is, you will never be sick enough for your eating disorder, not even when you are dead. Doctors and health professionals need to know not to comment on the way someone looks, as it has absolutely nothing to do with how severe their eating disorder is. Ignorance and lack of education, use of outdated treatment that doesn't come from people with lived experience, can do more harm than good. Recently, I had a dietitian who I worked with for a long time, who claimed to have lived experience. But it was her sibling that had the lived experience, not her. She had no idea how to treat me, and it caused incredible harm. Weighing. Unless someone needs an anaesthetic for surgery, there is no reason to be weighed. You have the right to refuse to be weighed, and this can be noted on your medical file, so clinicians know this. Isolation is very unhelpful, as eating disorders thrive in it, taking advantage of you keeping their secret. So if you don't have a support network, it's likely your eating disorder will exploit that, kind of like having an abusive partner. Although it has been helpful for me to externalise my eating disorder as a part of me, when clinicians abuse that externalisation by using language such as, I'm not willing to talk to Juliet's eating disorder, I'm going to wait until Juliet comes back into the room to continue. That is exceptionally dismissive and confusing, at least to me, but I'm sure to many others. I am Juliet. I have an eating disorder. I'm not two separate things, and I'm never my eating disorder. For me, traditional therapies and medications which are commonly used to treat eating disorders and the related symptoms don't tend to work, which could be due to my neurodivergence. So I've had to figure out what does work, like yoga. In summary, I would say the most unhelpful things are a general lack of awareness and education, and the stigma that is perpetuated in our society by uninformed people, whether that be the media or from clinicians directly. What I would love to see in the future? Well, it was certainly not covered by the document released from the Minister this week, which I was disappointed by. I would like to see an up-to-date, inclusive, funded system of care here, which is based on evidence-based treatments, the experience of sufferers, and includes many more properly trained eating disorder-informed clinicians with lived experience. I want to see CCI coaches be recognised and funded as eating disorder professionals who can work alongside psychologists. In my experience, most psychologists do not have the training necessary to help someone with an eating disorder, and as I've mentioned, peer support workers are certainly not a replacement for highly qualified CCI coaches or lived experience clinicians. I want intensive training for GPs and other healthcare providers. The ACC sensitive claims system needs to change I have an ACC sensitive claim with my anorexia as a covered injury, but dealing with ACC was traumatic for me and is for many others I know. So traumatic that I had to disengage with them and forfeit their funding. I do not want to hear nutritional services are not considered clinically significant to someone with a diagnosis of anorexia ever again. After hearing it so many times, I had to place a complaint. I believe that ACC-sensitive claim clients with eating disorders should be allocated eating disorder-informed lived experience clinicians so that they can feel safe and heard. I would like to see government-funded care for anyone that needs it at any stage, including at the only residential treatment centre in New Zealand, Recovered Living, which is based on the Carolyn Costin model of treatment. My hope is that more centres like Recovered Living will emerge, and a 24-hour helpline run by trained staff with lived experience would be useful. I would like to see a national funded eating disorder association that advocates for change, runs support groups, educates, and holds events like this Eating Disorders Awareness Week. One that connects clients to appropriate clinicians with lived experience and provides community. In New Zealand currently there is no national community space, virtual or otherwise. Early intervention and education for anyone who has anything to do with children has to be a priority. That could have saved me from 36 years of pain and also saved my parents a huge amount of money that they could not afford. I would also like to see free, timely ASD assessments available to those needing one. Finally, I do want to acknowledge how privileged I was to have the experience of residential treatment. So many don't have the access to anything. But thanks to my family and a large number of very generous people, my treatment was able to be paid for. Was it enough to heal me? No. But did it save my life multiple times? Absolutely. Neither myself nor my son would be here without Carolyn Costin and that treatment that I received in America. There are people dying from eating disorders in this country, more often than anyone knows. And to me, that is simply unacceptable and shameful. Thank you.
And thank you to you, Juliet. That was an incredibly powerful handing over of your experience. And I think everybody here will agree it's a privilege to hear you speak. So thank you once again. And we hope to be keeping connected and really hearing the sort of value of lived experience voices being included in all processes are something which is a really overarching theme of Juliet's presentation. And that's something that we hope to continue with. It is a highly important part. There can be no design and no co-designing without lived experience and following up to see how well things are working. So this is something that we would really also love to see and support in continuing with. And a large part of that, again, is talking to prevention and early intervention in what is helpful and why it's helpful. That's why unpacking the why is such an important theme for this inaugural Eating Disorders Awareness Week. So talking to community is a huge area where we have a lot of crossovers and connections which we might not necessarily understand and recognise have effects upon people. And again, Juliet touched upon that quite significantly in language. A lot of our language is something that has become quite a deeply ingrained area in our culture, which we might not be aware of. And some things that we say can inadvertently start to cause that little niggle. And again, it's something that so many people really do hand over. And I remember that myself, even though it's from many years back. And it's something I hear regularly. Just certain comments that might have been throwaway comments or something that we tend to use in our culture. And we start to ask people to raise curiosity. Again, perhaps, is this a necessary thing to say? Could I be saying something else without focusing upon somebody's appearance and how they look? Because we know that less than 6% of people with an eating disorder are clinically diagnosed as being underweight. That's a fact. That leaves 94% plus of people who are in normal-sized bodies or in bodies of higher weight. So if we make a comment about somebody's appearance, we don't know their journey. We don't know where they're at. They might be experiencing a long-term chronic health condition. They might be in an area of sports where they have tremendous pressures upon them in training and haven't received the support in how to fuel themselves well. They might be in areas where they're under a lot of stress. They might be newly bereaved. That was a serious trigger for me. So I would really ask people to start to consider how we talk to people, and before we make a comment, consider that. Can we concentrate on something else? What have you been doing recently? How's this been going? What are your latest interests? I love that sweater you're wearing. It's such a beautiful colour. We can start to say so many more positive things. We don't have to talk about our latest diet. We don't have to talk about our training schedule and regimes. We don't have to talk about these areas. We can talk with lots more positivity. So, community awareness is an area where parents and whānau, my pronunciation with Māori is from an English perspective and I get words wrong. Admitting mistakes is a really important thing. But going back to that, with community support, we have some amazing organisations that are really starting to recognise the whole connection of eating disorders have across so many different areas of well-being and mental health conditions. And they're really starting to draw together teams and programmes of support. One I particularly admired recently was learning about Yellow Brick Road in Christchurch. And we are really fortunate today to have Yellow Brick Road C, John Moore, who has come here to talk about the programme that they led and who it was for and why it was working well. So, without further ado, I will invite John to come up and talk to us, and I look forward to hearing more.
Kia ora everyone. As Sarah said, I'm John Moore, from CEO of Yellow Brick Road Te Wahapu Aho. I'll try and stick to my 5 minutes. It can take me 20 minutes to explain why the heck we're called Yellow Brick Road, but I'll do my best. Yes, Yellow Brick Road is the largest specialist provider of whānau mental health support in New Zealand. And by largest, we're still really very small. Whānau support is an oft-neglected part of mental health and wellbeing services in New Zealand, which is fairly fitting because whānau are often neglected and forgotten part of the mental health ecosystem as well. But to us, whānau are the largest and most important provider of mental health support and wellbeing in New Zealand. So I might hijack the kaupapa of the day, which is unpacking the how, or unpacking the why, and go with, well, why support whānau? So, whānau, our mental health system wasn't designed to support whānau. It was designed to diagnose illnesses, treat them and cure people. And that's not realistic. That's not the way mental health and wellbeing works at all. And we're there because when people are struggling, as human beings, we're designed to lean on each other. And the first people we're leaning on are our friends and family, our whānau. But if they're struggling, things can go badly. So we put our energy into awhiing the people that provide that essential support to people that are going through it. I know whānau, you feel often that you can't rest until your loved one is well. But that can be incredibly toxic, because if you don't get that rest, your loved one's unlikely to be well. So we're a service that's there to remind you of that important fact, that if you neglect yourself, you can't help anybody else. And we help you to find a strategy for how and when to do that, because it can seem a fairly insulting idea, even if you remind yourself to have it, around how can I find myself a break? I've got far too much on to give myself a break. That's ignoring the reality for me. But we're here to try and help you navigate that and try and find some capacity for yourself. Sarah talked about a project that we did in Aotearoa, and it was alongside a tangata whaiora provider. Francisca's in the back there. And the way this service worked was we were meeting people who were on the wait list for CAF service. For those that may be listening to this not in Christchurch, that's CAMS, most parts of the country, child and adolescent mental health. And the idea was we had a service that was supporting the rangatahi, who was experiencing mental distress, and we had us supporting the whānau that are experiencing mental distress. And that is, we think, the answer to, getting the best out of mental health services in a lot of ways. Because rangatahi and whānau don't always see things the same way. In fact, they're not supposed to. At that point in your development, you're finding your own road, and those clashes are inevitable. So if you're supporting a young person and you're taking on their parents' view of them, you're probably missing a lot of the point for them. But if you're supporting a family and you're defining them by the way that their young loved one has defined them, then you're probably not seeing them the way they see themselves. So this idea of everyone getting advocacy was a key part of that program, and it's a key part of what Yellow Brick Road does. And I really would encourage people, if you're struggling to support a loved one, whether that be an eating disorder or anything else, try and find some support for yourself, because that could be the difference between sanity and not. And we want to help you to prioritise your well-being so you are fit for that fight. We want to support you to advocate for your needs, whether that's banging our head against the wall that you've been trying to knock down to get the services that you know you and your whānau need, or whether that's negotiating with a clinician in order to work in partnership as opposed to being told what to do. Because we often have whānau that are told to do something by their clinician that they in their heart feel is wrong, but they don't have the strength and the confidence to negotiate for an alternative way of doing things, because they doubt themselves, or because they feel that if they don't do what they're told, they will be denied a service and their loved one will get worse. So that's Yellow Brick Road. That's what we do. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the opportunity to talk. Your appreciation for us is very much something that we share. We are really supportive of your work and your approach. It's so consistent with our values and our kaupapa, so thanks.
And again, thank you so much to you, John. Greatly in admiration of the services you guys provide. It's been invaluable, and it's something that many families have talked to as well. So just the value of having that connection. And this is what we're talking to about, the difference that support can make across the community. And having that wraparound support for the whole family is vital inclusion. We see so much value to this. And having that support decreases the stress levels across the whole family. So it decreases the stress from the parents, so they're in a better position to provide support and to have that education where they have the understanding and the why and how things are working is just absolutely gold. And the more that we as parents can support, and the more that we as whānau can support our loved ones, the more they're able to progress back to a position that they truly would like to be in. So without further ado from that, I would really like to welcome somebody who's been an invaluable support to a lot of people and is also has come from a position of lived experience and uses a lot of that amazing work around looking after yourself in her own self-care with her inspiration with her photographic work. And she inspires so many people with her journey and your continuing work, Victoria. So we greatly value having you here. So I would love you to come up and share about yourself. Now I've embarrassed you completely.
There should be some nice pictures coming up. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to use my yoga breath now to calm myself down. So thanks everyone for coming, and it's really nice to see a lot of my clients here. So well done for being brave and showing up. You guys really inspire me, and so I am a dietitian. I work solely with eating disorders, mainly because I had an eating disorder myself when I was a child, well actually up until I was an adult. So I was going to talk about my last name as well, because it's something that I've had a lot of embarrassment about. So it's Schönwald, Schonwald. A lot of people will say Schönwald or Schönwald or whatever comes out, and that's totally okay. Like, I've never even pronounced it properly. But I went to Germany for the first time this year, and my last name actually means beautiful forest. And people would say schön all the time. Schön, schön, schön. And I'm like, oh, this is my name. So I was like, my name is actually really cool. And people that I'd met were like, wow, you've got such a beautiful name. So, and also my father is the German part of the name, and he's really sick at the moment, and he's my hero. So I just want to give some shout out to him, because I guess he helps me be who I am. So why did I get an eating disorder? I'm going to say traits, temperaments, personality type, fussy eating as a child. I hated food as a kid. I had my safe foods of probably potatoes, eggs, milk, and Weet-Bix. And luckily they're quite high energy, nutritious foods, because from the age of 6, I was a competitive swimmer. So we swam for 9 sessions a week from a very young age, before school, after school, weekends, trips away. So basically 6 Weet-Bix before training, 6 Weet-Bix after training, lots of toast and mashed potatoes after training. I was shamed by my mother around my lack of food choice, and she wouldn't make me dinner and said, I'm not making a separate meal for you. So I had to learn how to kind of cook for myself, so I just got really good at cooking eggs. But anyway, I ended up developing, well, I probably had ARFID, to be honest, as a child. But I ended up with a restrictive eating disorder as a teenager, and kind of changed my life for the worse. There's no fun in an eating disorder. I don't want to get too much into the sad parts of it, but I do want to say that I always had big dreams and wanted to do a lot of things, but because I'm such a sensitive soul, as soon as somebody says something negative to me, I will change my mind and do something else, or try something else. But then that made me look really flaky, and so then I guess that didn't do good for my mental health, but then people thought that I was, ditzy and whatever. But I just needed someone to believe in me. So anyway, I started believing in myself and did lots of learning. I did my first yoga class when I was 24, and I can tell you that changed my life. I learned how to breathe in a way that I never even knew was possible. I used to do a lot of this all the time, and people would be like, "What's wrong with you? Are you upset with me?" I'm like, "No, I'm just breathing." I didn't actually quite realize that you can actually breathe into your tummy. So, yoga was kind of a big part of my life for the last, I was 24, I'm now 46, so it has been a big part of it. Also, the reason why we've got the photography behind me is I bought my first camera when I was 15, a film SLR, and I've been really interested in nature and hiking and things. So, however, there's a little bit of a split here. Exercise person, always going 1 million miles an hour. So the exercise addiction brain always thought that I was going to be the next best thing, right? But then learning how to breathe properly and relax and notice your surroundings, taking photos on my walks or my runs or bike rides or swimming makes you, I guess, be a bit more connected to where you are and enjoy the moment, right? So your walks become more about not just you, I guess, and calories and burning and body image and all the other things. So there's a lot of things that kind of come together to create something beautiful, right? Like it's not just about the exercise. I feel like I'm going on a tangent now. So anyway, I went to uni and became a dietitian and really decided I love science, and I knew that I wanted to work in eating disorders, so I just did all my professional development on that. And I feel like I still had an eating disorder when I started uni, to be honest, because the rules were there. Finished uni, no food rules, yay. So I guess what I want to kind of sum up with is we can't recover without food. Your brain's not going to make those changes in neural pathways without food. We're not talking about how food is really important in mental health enough. And I've got permission to talk about an example with one of my clients, and this happened yesterday. So I work with a boy or man with ARFID, and when he first came to me, he just ate Weet-Bix, so Weet-Bix breakfast, lunch and dinner. He was very malnourished, and so after the last few years, we've been doing like food challenges and food rules, and I really relate to him as well, just because of his childhood rigidity. And so he now loves Japanese food and will eat big bowls of ramen and can deal with whatever's going to be putting it into his mouth. So he's now booked a flight to Japan, and he's also gone on Tinder, which is really exciting because now he could go on dates. And we have such great fun in our sessions, right? We've created a connection where he comes to me, or we go to cafes now, and we feel safe, we're laughing and having a good time. So he is okay with putting random crap in his mouth now, right? So one of my still fair foods up until yesterday was sardines. Like, so scary. And so I was thinking, well, if you're going to Japan, you're going to have to get used to a few different types of seafood. So we had mackerel, sardines, anchovies, and some salmon tin stuff. And so we made, and this was thanks to you, Amy, as well, talking about it the other day. We had the sardines on toast, and we both ate the whole toast, all the sardines, and we were like, oh my God, this is so good. And the funny thing is with the anchovies, we both hated them so much, but he kept going back for more just because of the crazy experience in his mouth. And But this is, this is the neuroplasticity, right? He's learnt to be able to trust the process of putting stuff in his mouth and being okay, and his world has just opened up so widely. So I just wanted to end with a fun, positive story, because there is so much hope and so much joy that food can bring to, the connection is amazing. So yeah, food is love. Thank you.
And thank you to Victoria, who I'll still call Shonwald. I'm never going to get that different. But again, this is a really, really important part of, again, our topic, unpacking the why. It's how somebody's experiences, personal experiences, can really change and mould how we're looking at our own well-being and our own encouragement, and what's influencing us into wanting to help others. Because when we see other people's struggles, we know that things can be very different. And a lot of that is empowering things as well that we're finding. And from a parent perspective, I found that walking alongside somebody, one of my children, almost as I did when they were very little, is a really empowering way to approach things. So we encourage, we support, we acknowledge pain, we acknowledge distress, and we encourage. So if we hold back, if we show fear, if we show misunderstanding, and if we show a way forward, that also gives people hope. That's a really important point. And that's where people, such as Victoria and her role, give that empowerment. They offer hope, they can encourage, and they can support because they're coming from their own journey. So this goes right across the whole connected sector. And that's why working together, we can all share that understanding. We're not all working in isolation, we are joining the dots and we're unpacking the whys. And those are really critical areas. I'm just looking down at my list here. And leading into that, talking about encouragement and support, we now have an amazing person who's agreed to come along. And again, I'm going to struggle with names. Nicole Gaviria. There we go. Nicola is an amazing person who I came across who is approaching helping women. We connected recently. And I'm so thrilled that she's going to be offered support to help make people much more aware of her programme. And again, this is from a lived experience role, so I'm very thrilled that you're coming here to share this experience and how it's influenced your desire to help other people as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome.
Hi everyone. Yes, so I've got my little notes here because I might ramble. So here we are. Well, thank you for having me, everyone. It's a real pleasure, and I'm very excited that, Aotearoa has finally decided to recognise a week for eating disorders and body image. That is so exciting. I'm Nicole Gaviria. I'm a registered counsellor. I'm an entrepreneur and the founder of Binge Free Bestie. So before any of that came to life, I was someone who lived through binge eating disorder and also body shame. So I'll give you a little bit of my story. So for much of my life, I believed that the problem was me. So if I only had a little bit more willpower, maybe then I'd stop eating. If I only lost the weight, then maybe people would see me. I was a woman in a plus-size body. I've been every shape and size under the sun, and I felt so invisible in this society. If only I fixed my body, then maybe I would be able to stop eating. Then maybe I would be able to find some peace, some confidence. Maybe it would be okay to step out in the world. So this belief that being in a bigger body wasn't okay meant that I did everything I possibly could to try and change that. So any diet you can name, I've done it. I've done everything. Endless diets, every gym program, any sort of gym cult that exists, I've been part of that. Any pill that you could get, I've done it. Any cleanse, any juice, any shake. And all of this while I was completely broke. Every dollar that I had went into either trying the next diet or the next cleanse, or into the big food shop where I would binge in my car and then hide all the wrappers in the glove box or in the outside bin so no one would know what I was doing. There was so much shame and so much guilt. Eventually, I decided that the only thing I could do, as suggested by my GP, was to have a weight loss surgery. I was never screened for an eating disorder, even though I asked my GP for help and said, is there something wrong with me? What am I doing? I was told, you just need to eat less and you just need to move more. But of course, I was doing that. I was doing all of that and nothing was working. So I went for the surgery. I had a gastric sleeve. I got most of my stomach taken out permanently. And I felt like that was the best thing to do at the time. No regrets, and I fully support everyone who decides to take that journey. Your body, your choice. But the thing was, I didn't get any support for my relationship with food and eating in my body. So yes, I got my dream body, awesome. I felt like I could be in the world, it was okay to be seen. I started dating, I left a terrible relationship because maybe now someone might actually love me. So that was okay. I went back to uni and did my master's in counselling because I felt like I deserved more now. But I still was binging. My tummy might have been smaller, but I was still putting as much food as possible into my body and making myself very sick. So what I learned was that I needed to work on that relationship with food and eating. And that's what I did. Again, went back to my GP, went to my surgeon, Evan. There was nothing available in my community. Well, I did get offered one group. I went along, and after one session, I disclosed about my surgery, and they said, don't come back. This group is probably not the best fit for you as someone who's had a weight loss surgery. So yes, I felt very isolated, and I still felt very ashamed. So yes, what I learned was that it wasn't a lack of discipline that was making me eat. It wasn't that I was out of control. I wasn't a mess. I wasn't broken. Binge eating, or my binge eating was driven by toxic messaging that I grew up with. I'm a 90s baby, but I think everyone in this room, doesn't matter when you were born, we've all been in this same world. We're all conditioned by the same stuff. We've all learned about the thin ideal. You know, thin is always going to be in, I'm afraid. You know, what about that documentary we recently saw on Netflix about The Biggest Loser, when they were blatantly fat-shaming on TV for entertainment? That's what we saw, that was around us growing up, so of course I internalised that. So I want to share a little bit, by the way, I'm fully recovered now. Since 2019 I haven't binged, which is awesome. But that was self-led, totally self-led. Luckily I was at UC, Canterbury Uni, and I had access to all their resources when I was doing my own studies. So I just became my own guinea pig. I just learned about CBT and mindfulness. I went to India, trained there in yoga as well, and then just put it all together. And I come up with this, The Breakup. It's called The Breakup because it's about breaking up with diet culture and body shame and all the bullshit that goes with it. So I was my own first client. I want to tell you about what was unhelpful for me in my recovery journey, and I'm sure you've heard pieces of it in what I've shared so far. What was most unhelpful was when I did go to help. I never got any screening from my primary health provider because I was in a bigger body, or at least that's what I believe. These systems really medicalised my weight and really focused on that. I was labelled as a morbidly obese woman, and I also happen to have a heart disorder. So they told me that I was harming myself, and then I needed to take responsibility for my health. But I was trying everything I could, right? So the next thing that was super unhelpful was not just that shame, but the isolation. The biggest thing with binge eating is that it thrives in isolation. We are the ones who are sitting in our cars eating, like I did, 5 burgers in one sitting and then hiding the evidence. We don't generally ask for help because we think we're the problem. You know, just move more, eat less. What was helpful was finding community. I didn't find that in Christchurch. I didn't actually find that in New Zealand. I found it online. I found an online space of women who were talking about the anti-diet approach, who were talking about health at every size, who were talking about food freedom and intuitive eating, and those were totally new, foreign ideas to me. So I think the power of online communities and peer support is what made the biggest difference for me. So yeah, that's essentially what I wanted to share. I have something else really cool I think you might like to know, is in July, I entered Binge Free Bestie into an international business challenge. I thought, why not throw my hat in the ring, just girl from New Zealand, give it a shot. And 16,000 people competed, and I won. So, yes, thank you. So in October, I'm flying to LA. The competition was hosted by Stephen Bartlett. He is the host of Diary of a CEO and a panellist on Dragon's Den UK. He will be financially backing Binge Free Bestie to grow and make global impact. Obviously, Christchurch is the first place I'm starting, and New Zealand, but I'm building a food freedom empire that's going to make global impact. So I'm hoping that in LA I'm going to be able to make networks, get more resources, and bring them back here home to us. And yeah, so that's my story. That is my why. That's why I'm so damn passionate about this. We all deserve support, and we all deserve to know that it is not your fault, you are not broken, and recovery is absolutely possible. Thanks for having me. And these are my details if you want to connect.
Thank you so much. Again, having people come along, hopefully this is giving a really good context and some wider perspective in what's coming up, what is available. So the future is a really exciting thing in how people are starting to view what can be helpful, and hopefully providing some more resources is a hugely important thing for everyone. So whether it's parents and carers or whānau, or whether it's people who are currently struggling, having this type of hope is something that we need to start instilling across our whole community in greater understanding that this is not an isolation illness, this is an illness where we can all come together and provide support. That's a critical part of this journey for everyone involved. So thank you, Nicole, that was amazing. And again, the influences that this has upon people really affects our whole lives. And leading to that, this is where I'd like to really welcome our next presenter, who is come down from the North Island, again, because of her passion for this particular area of support and wanting to make a difference, because we're all coming together here, because we're all people who want to make a difference. So, without any further delays, I would like to welcome Charlotte Giblin, who is an author, presenter, an artist, and has had a whole career behind her, led by her lived experience of her mother. So,
thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to Sarah for organising this amazing event. I'm really honoured to be here. I have come all the way down from New Plymouth just to be here for this. My first time in Christchurch. Beautiful day yesterday. Really, really enjoyed it. And I wouldn't have missed this for anything. This is an incredibly important event, and Sarah and I connected, it was only in April, after I spent an extended period of time in the UK this year, actually last year, I lose track of time, helping my dad. And I came back understanding, I turned 50, and I came back understanding that I had an absolute wealth of experience and knowledge across a broad range of different areas in the arts and speaking and mental health, and wanting to do something with it. And I started reaching out to do something more with it. I started reaching out to a lot of mental health charities and eating disorder groups, and Sarah and I really clicked. And I approached people saying, what can I do to help? I want to be able to help. And so here I am. And I am an artist, and with the help of this tree, I'm going to show you how seeing clearly through an artist's eyes can genuinely change the way you view the world, the other people in it, and yourselves. I think more than ever, we need additional tools in which we can see things with a new perspective. We definitely need to allow ourselves to develop more compassion and tolerance. It's incredibly important, more than ever at the moment. And usually, I use these methods. I'm going to talk you through a very simple, step-by-step artistic technique for recreating this tree in acrylic paint. And primarily, I teach these to people who come to me who want to improve their painting skills. But I discovered as a side effect that the same simple artistic techniques could help me and others to see and understand in an incredibly powerful, simplistic way our own different energy levels, the differences between us, and crucially, our abilities to change. A lot has been said already from the wonderful speakers before me about the key factor of isolation and how detrimental that can be. And when you're starting to paint in acrylic, a really important thing to understand is that you're working from the back to the front. So the very first thing that you do is create the environment where you're going to then plant the tree. And instantly we have this beautiful notion and this understanding that everything is connected. The tree is instantly in an environmental space. You're making the context, which helps to really anchor the knowledge that nothing is untethered and floating in the universe. We are all connected in this space, between the energy of the air, between the concrete of the floor. And the painting process really helps to highlight that. It's a very important moment to pause and think about. The next thing to address is the shadows. We perceive reality in three-dimensional structure through the play of light and shade. Shadows are absolutely vital in any kind of understanding of structure. And so by planting the shadows, by creating the plane of the land and starting to show where the shapes and the forms and the whole picture are going to be, we start to understand what's being built. Also, working from the back to the front, you might not realize, because as an artist, we have to see clearly with honest eyes. You have to look beyond what you think is there to what is really there. And behind the bright green leaves are the shadows. So when we're painting, we start with the entire form in shadow. We start with the darkest form that we can possibly make. You can't quite see because of the light here, but that's an incredibly deep purple. And very gradually, we start building up layers of green over the top. And by the time we get to the 5th layer of green, you can start to see some kind of form emerging. After 7 layers, students will stop in my classes and say, well, I've finished my tree. Look at this, there's some beautiful structure there. You can see the shadows sort of in between the leaves. I'm done. And I will say, let's go back to that photograph. Remember, an artist's job is to see clearly with honest eyes, to understand with a different perspective how we're looking at the world. And if we zoom in just to a random part of that tree, and you look inside those red circles, you might be thinking, well, trees are green, leaves are green. But when you really look at the colours, where you look beyond what you think is there to what's really there, you start seeing yellows, you start seeing all kinds of different lime colours. And then if you really look at the light, look at the brightness on those leaves, the way that the light is reflecting off the waxy surface, you start to see very light greys. There are even whites. Now, it's one thing to cognitively understand what I'm saying and for you to be able to see the light on the leaves, but there's something else which happens when you try to manifest that information. As it passes through your own context of experiences, I see time and time again people doubting what they're seeing. They don't quite believe in their own confidence to apply that cognitive understanding into their own paintings. Maybe some of the students will stretch to another couple of layers of green. And this is the point where I will start saying with intense passion, come on, push the light. You've seen the brightness in the leaves. Can't you put it in your paintings? It's such a risk-free area to practice, extending your boundaries, extending your confidence. At this point, I will start putting the white into the painting. I will put in those bright highlights and I'll say, look, now you've got the furthest point of light to extend to. Can you start filling in some of the gaps? And it becomes much easier then when someone else has shown you the furthest point to extend to. And all of a sudden we have this fully lit kind of object. Now at this point, I've been so focused on the brightness, on all of that lovely light, that the object has become completely unbalanced. In any form of our lives, in any part of your practice, whether it's something as simple as painting a tree or whether it's a really important part of your daily practice, no matter how bright and positive the focus is, if you spend too much time looking at one area of your life or one area of your painting, it becomes completely unbalanced. Now, the shadows are absolutely vital to understand structure, to have three-dimensional realism within your life, within yourself. And this is the point where the conversation between light and dark must begin. We must introduce those shadows back again. This is not a new painting. This is continuing to build upon the image that you've already created. No brush mark is ever wasted. No amount of time spent refining your own tree is ever a waste of time. But this is where you need to start looking back at the structure of the shadows, working from within again. Remember, with acrylic paint, we're starting from within, from everything that's behind, and we start building up those layers. I suddenly notice I've got the shape wrong. I can change the profile of my tree. Because the more you look, the more you see, the more you understand, if you can look with an honest perspective, which is really hard to do, but an art practice gives you the tools to do that. I start building up all of these different layers, and I can see that there are mauve tones and there are light greys, which I hadn't noticed before. And before I know it, 30 colours later, I've built this really balanced, beautiful, structured object which has so much depth. I've spent so much time working back and forth on all those layers, that conversation between light and dark, tiny brush marks, tiny additions, and suddenly, there we have it, this incredible, fulsome object. What's amazing, though, if we look at the original photograph, where I've been trying to adhere with absolute faithful honesty the colours that are in the original tree photo, and my image has become completely divorced from that. The colours are so much brighter, and I've been trying to retain the original tones of the photo. So what's happened there? It's almost as if, I mean, we understand that art is an extension of the artist, but it's almost as if I'm seeing sunshine which isn't there. So why is that? Because it wasn't always that way. This was me 10 years ago, or a part of me. I had visions of these paintings a few years before I did them, and it was as if my creative soul was yearning to have a voice that my conscious self didn't have the courage to tell. It's at this stage where these paintings started to emerge, where I realized I had to address the repeating cycles, the spiral that I'd trapped myself in of negative behavioral patterns. I was near constantly anxious, fearful, ill all of the time, and I buried it, I suppressed it, and focused instead on the bright, fluffy leaves on the outside to try and distract people. Very few would have known that I had so much fear and darkness within me. And I did something which took a great deal of courage at the time. I used my art practice and I turned it towards myself as a mirror. This is very hard to do. And I looked at myself with the honest eyes of my art practice to understand how I could change my own behavior, my reactions, my actions. I looked at where I had made mistakes, where I was doing things I didn't feel were part of the integrity, the way I wanted to behave, the way I wanted to operate. And gradually, things started to change. I was determined to make changes, but I had to look within at the shadows and address the roots of my fear to be able to make any changes. I had to build up my own painting from the inside out and take responsibility. And as one of the subjects that's come up many times again today, self-care. I had to learn to put myself forward. And that was one of the reasons why I'd become so unwell and hidden in the shadows, by putting other people first. 4 years later, complete transformation of self. I mean, look at the change of the colour palette. Look at the change in the posture. Here I am in my warrior goddess garb, ready to take on the world. Totally different feeling. This certainly wasn't the end of my journey, but it was a pivotal point of being able to move forward in a very, very different way. So obviously, if I could transform myself in this way and make radical changes to my behaviour, eradicate all the nervous anxiety within me, well, everybody could do that, couldn't they? Now, this is a painting of my mum, 6 years before she died. The death certificate says frailty as the cause of death, which is a nod to her lifelong struggle with anorexia nervosa. She was 11 when her parents were divorcing. She was the middle child of 3. In her mind, her 11-year-old logical mind, each of her siblings would go with a parent, and she was a problem that needed to be solved. And she decided the only way to solve it was to disappear. She'd already established such a sense of lack of self-worth, such a sense of not believing that she deserved to live, that she started to vanish. She started to try and eradicate herself from the world and to cease to be a problem. It wasn't her parents' fault. The divorce didn't trigger her anorexia. It was that potent combination of so many different factors, of her neurological wiring, her biological makeup, temperament, environmental factors, all rolled in together. But in semi-rural Canada in the 1950s, certainly wasn't recognised or acknowledged. And I still see some of that being repeated today. It wasn't picked up by the medical establishment, And so a lifelong battle between her light and dark established from that early age. She had many periods of brightness. She gave birth to 2 healthy, big children. But there was so much within her that kept pulling her back into these cycles of control, of feeling that she didn't deserve to be alive, that was very, very difficult to watch. Out of the 30 colours I used in my painting, I put a box around the ones that Mum would have felt comfortable with and a dotted line around ones she might have extended to after a strong cup of tea and a biscuit. But the hardest thing for me to discover, when I was in my 20s, I realised that I couldn't transfer the brightness, the spectrum of colours that I was able to use. I couldn't transfer my palette onto her for any lasting period of time. I was too much. It was too bright for her. She couldn't take it on board. She had her own palette of colours to work with. And so I had a choice to make. I could either reduce the colours I used when I was with her and make her feel more comfortable and enable us to evolve a relationship in a really positive way, or I could shine as brightly as possible as we're told to. Shine your light. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Don't be an enabler. I chose to alter my palette of colours, and I was able to get the most wonderful experience of a relationship from her and to see how she operated. Mum's colours were at the bottom. She's an earthy brown tones person, a light olive colour. She didn't even have the rich greens of the palette that I extended to. And yet for her, going to that brightest green in her spectrum, that was enough. Being able to see what she could work with the colours that she was given at birth. And we're all given a set of colours at birth. And some of them you can change, and some of them you can't. But some of them you can alter incrementally if you're given the right support and encouragement. And she had a lot of that around her. But being able to acknowledge that somebody simply can't extend in the way that you would like them to, in the way that you wish they could experience life, is quite a profound, difficult realization to come to. But it's very important. I know from my classes that jumping from a painting with 7 green colours in it to the brightest highlights of white is an impossible leap to sustain. You have to build up your picture incrementally for any kind of lasting change to embed. For you to be able to embody those bright tones, it's a constant back and forth, the conversation between light and dark, seeing how you can build up very slowly your own palette of colours. To some people, my extent is going to seem bright and daunting and overwhelming, and to other people it's going to be completely limited and dull. And this is another issue that we have to face constantly, and I call it it's a really cruel culture of comparison, which of course is made even more prevalent and obvious with social media, where people only show you their brightest palette of colours, the brightest extent of their spectrum. They don't tend to show you all of the dark doldrums that they're in. But we have to have the shadows there to have any kind of three-dimensional structure and realism. Without it, we don't exist. No object exists without shadows. It doesn't have any form. Each of these trees has its own story. They all have structure. They all have slight variations. They're all part of a journey. Now, can you, with your current palette of colours, appreciate what you've got? without looking with envy or self-disgust or any kind of recriminating feelings, without looking at somebody else's and feeling you're not good enough. That's very challenging to do. Could you also look at somebody else's reduced palette of colours and appreciate what they've got, where they are right now, without trying to change it, without trying to fix it? That's also very difficult to do. But I know through my own work as an art teacher, as somebody who operates in the self-help sphere, and someone who cared for her mother with anorexia. She lived until she was 77, by the way, so she did well. There's a lot of hope there. And as someone who's overcome a great deal of anxiety and fear, to be able to stand up here with complete confidence as a different version of myself, that if you can accept where you are right now and embrace that point, but understand that you can make changes in your own time with the right support and the right encouragement, you are in a spectacular position. Not to expect too much of yourself, but to expect enough. You can grow when you want to, but also understanding that there are times where you simply can't, and you might get to the point where you've reached the limit of your spectrum, and then learn to operate within it with absolute appreciation and gratitude for being able to have those colours at all. There's a lot that we can learn from people who are different, and having any kind of self-acceptance and self-compassion is where you have to start, and knowing that if you want to make changes, you can, but try really hard not to look at the person sitting next to you and constantly compare yourself. You never know what shadows they're hiding, and we all need them. Thank you so much.
And again, that's a powerful piece of work that you shared with us. It's an incredible story. Thank you so much. And placing value upon the tremendous depths and differences that we all have as people is such a powerful part of this journey. And not only for parents and carers and whānau, but for people to be able to understand to be kind to yourself and meeting yourself where you're at. That's such an essential part of this. And it's something that goes right across our community, across a whole range of situations. And with eating disorders and body image difficulties, we know that they don't thrive in isolation. So this is a whole connected area, and again, connecting the dots. This is an important part of where we're coming from. And one of the main reasons that we all have come together as people with such overriding passion to help other people by raising the depth and the colours and the tones and the connections that apply across us all as a society. And I think that draws us to a close. We've done pretty well for a first time, and I am incredibly honoured that so many people have reached out and wanted to support this. It's been a very fast turnaround first inaugural week for eating disorders and body image awareness, but we truly believe that it has become a robust movement in New Zealand to want to do more. There are lots of bright sparks out there. There are so many stars that are all wanting to share their messages of support and encouragement, and mostly all an overriding hope, that I really encourage people to never give up and to always reach out. There are people out here for you, and we are here for you. And I think that draws us to a close, apart from I'd like to welcome Gillian Wordsworth back up to close for us with her karakia. And we look forward to welcoming you again to 2026. We will be doing another event, and it gives us 12 months of planning this time. So thank you very much, Julian.
I stand here with gratitude to those who've come today, who've set this time aside to focus on our thoughts on this area. This is a karakia of clearing restrictions and opening the path to return to our everyday activities. What a picture of healing. And I'll follow it with a very short waiata that talks of love, faith, peace and hope. And may you all walk from this place filled with hope. I'll ask you to stand for the karakia. Ka whakaaeria e te tapu, kia wātea I te ara, kia tūri ki whakataha ai, hui e tai ki e. Te aroha e whakapono, me te rangi mari e tātou tātou e.